The blade trembled in her hand as she realized the truth that would shatter everything she believed. She was not meant to survive the wedding. She was meant to be the fire's final offering. Long ago, a war of flame ravaged the continent. The kingdom of Aradwin, scorched by the wrath of fireborn magic, made a final bargain. A child of flame would marry a child of thorns, fire and earth, bound to keep the realm from burning again. The prince, Kyle, was born with fire beneath his skin. Cursed, they said. Dangerous. His mother, Queen Seraphine, locked away his power, but not the rage it carried. Elira Thorne was born in exile, the last of the healer line, her family's magic long erased from the royal record, until the day she was summoned back, to marry the prince who once burned her family's fields. Neither wanted the union, but magic did not ask for love. It demanded balance and blood. Elira stood still as the seamstress fastened the last clasp on her ceremonial dress. Her fingers twitched against the fabric, a deep crimson silk that shimmered like flame, threaded with runes she couldn't read. Outside the palace window, the sky boiled with the setting sun, red and brutal. She had never seen the capital before this week, never smelled its smoke, never heard its whispers. The kingdom that once hunted her family now wanted her as bride, and not for love, for prophecy. The boy with fire in his chest would wed the girl born under eclipse. Together, they would seal a kingdom's fate. Kale watched her from across the great hall. His crown sat too low on his brow, like it didn't belong. He hadn't spoken to her since their arrival. He barely looked at her. Elira told herself it was better that way. Easier. But deep inside, something trembled when their eyes met. Something ancient. As if they'd done this before. In another time. Another life. She shook the thought. They were strangers bound by treaty, not sentiment. And tomorrow, she would marry a weapon. In the quiet before the ceremony, Elira wandered through the Queen's garden, a place where nothing grew. Blackened vines clung to broken statues. The air reeked of soot. There, she found a mural half buried under ivy. 2 figures, hands clasped, surrounded by flame. One looked like her. The other had Kale's eyes. Her pulse quickened. She didn't believe in fate, but this felt like a warning. That night, as she lay in bed, sleep refused her. The walls of her chamber felt too close. She dreamt of fire, not burning, but watching. It licked along her skin like breath. When she awoke, the sheets were warm, too warm. And there, on her palm, was a mark she hadn't had before, a ring of soot, perfectly circular, unbroken. Kyle stood inside the Temple of Union, stone dust coating his boots. The place felt less like a chapel and more like a tomb. At its center, an ancient flame burned without fuel, suspended above a stone basin. This was the heart of the ritual, the moment the ashen vow would be sealed. He didn't want this. He didn't want her, but the fire inside him, the one that spoke in dreams, had grown restless since her arrival. It whispered her name, over and over. Elira entered through the western archway. Her gown trailed behind her like smoke, and when she stepped beside Kale, the fire surged. The flame brightened, lifted, reacted. The high priest's voice trembled. This has not happened in centuries. The air tightened as they joined hands. Elira's fingers were cold. Kale's were burning. And when their palms touched, the flame leapt from the altar and into their joined skin. Searing pain erupted through their arms, and yet neither of them screamed. The light around them pulsed, revealing runes carved into the stone beneath their feet, runes that had not been visible before, words in a lost tongue, a promise half forgotten. The fire did not just mark them, it bound them, soul to soul, past to present. Kale's eyes widened. He saw a battlefield, a kiss in the rain, a blade driven through her heart. None of it had happened, and yet it had. Elira staggered as the flame returned to its basin, smaller now, flickering weakly. She felt hollow, like something had been torn loose from her ribs. Kyle tried to speak, but she was already walking away. Her breath came in short bursts. She didn't cry, not yet, but the voice that rose in her chest was not hers. Do not repeat the vow. Break it this time. Rain dripped from the stone balcony as Kale leaned against the railing, staring down at the Capitol below. Fires crackled in distant forges. The city never slept. Neither did the voices. Since the binding, he had heard things, felt things, whispers in the dark corners of his mind. One voice called itself Orion, the first fire-bearer, the first to burn. It wanted out, and it saw Elira as a key. Orin, the court mage, warned him that the ritual had gone too deep. "She didn't just absorb your curse," he said. "She awakened it." Kyle clenched his fists. His skin had begun to glow at night, not brightly, but enough to scare the servants. He avoided mirrors, afraid of what he might see looking back, afraid the fire would change him, make him like Seraphine, make him a monster. Elira, meanwhile, wandered the palace halls like a ghost. The other nobles avoided her. Whispers followed her. Witch blood, fire bride, cursed. She found solace only in the old library, where she pored over records of flame-bearers past. Every single one ended in tragedy, and all of them were alone, until she found a letter, half-burned and hidden behind a false panel. "To the one who comes after me, I failed him. Do not fail yourself." It was signed with a name she didn't recognize, but the handwriting, it matched the mural in the garden. That night, Elira and Kyle crossed paths in the atrium. Neither spoke at first, until Elira said, "Do you hear them?" Kyle nodded. Always, and for the first time, they didn't feel alone in the fire, only trapped with someone who knew what it meant to burn quietly. Queen Seraphine sat on her throne, fingers drumming against a cup of wine she never drank. She watched her son from behind the curtain of the audience hall, eyes narrowing. The fire had responded to Elira. That was not supposed to happen. The girl was meant to absorb, not ignite. Years ago, Seraphine had siphoned her own fire into Kyle to keep herself alive. He was a vessel, a failsafe. She never expected the vessel to choose its own flame. Flashback. A young Seraphine kneeling in a blood-soaked temple, whispering a curse into her newborn son's skin. "May the fire bind to him and not to me. May he carry what I cannot." She had been dying. The fire was her only salvation. She had made a terrible choice, and justified it in the name of legacy. Now she saw that choice begin to unravel. In her private chamber, Seraphine summoned the Ember Mirror, a cursed artifact that showed truth through firelight. Elira's reflection shimmered. It split, revealed 5 silhouettes, 5 lives, all of them ending in ash. "No," the queen whispered. "Not again." She turned to her spy master. "Send riders to the Temple of Embers. Burn everything that mentions the Ashen Vow." But the spy master hesitated. "My queen, what if the flame chooses them for a reason?" Her hand slapped across his face with molten heat. "Then we will change its mind." Elira dreamed again. Not of fire this time, but of snow. A frozen field stretched before her, dotted with torches that never melted the frost. At the center stood a figure, cloaked in ash, faceless, waiting. "Come closer," the voice said, soft as smoke. She obeyed, and when she touched the figure's hand, memories crashed into her. Not hers, Kyle's. His loneliness, his pain, his first kill, his first fear, his mother's betrayal. She awoke with tears in her eyes, and Kyle's name on her lips. Across the palace, Kyle jolted awake with a gasp. The mark on his chest burned hot. They had shared a dream, a memory, not just a connection, a merging. He stood from bed, shaking. This wasn't a bond. It was a warning. Elira found him before dawn, in the training yard, shirtless and burning at the edges. "We have to talk," she said. He didn't speak, only nodded. Then, "We've done this before, haven't we?" "Yes," she whispered. "We always die." He looked at her then, truly looked, not as a stranger, not as a curse, but as the one person who might know what it meant to survive this. "So what do we do now?" Her voice trembled. "We change the ending." Kyle stood before the sealed door beneath the palace, an ancient slab of stone no one dared open for centuries. Orin had spoken of it in whispers. "The old flame sleeps there," the mage had said, "and if it wakes, the world won't survive it a second time." Kyle could feel it calling. The same rhythm that pulsed in his veins echoed from beyond that door. When he pressed his palm to the stone, the markings on his chest glowed, and the stone breathed. Not cracked, not crumbled, breathed. Elira watched from the shadows, her heartbeat in her throat. She had read of this place. Iluron, a buried city, a fire-forged sanctuary that was destroyed long ago, or so they were told. In truth, it was sealed, buried by Seraphine's ancestors to trap the source of flame magic, not to protect the world, Alira whispered to herself, to hoard its power. And now, the seal was weakening, because Kyle was waking it, or maybe it was waking for him. Together, they entered the chamber beyond the stone. It was not a tomb. It was a heart, vast, hollow, and alive. Runed columns reached skyward, supporting nothing but silence. Flame danced in braziers that had never been lit, and at the center, an altar carved from obsidian, with a crystal burning inside. Not fire, memory. When Kale stepped closer, the flame leapt toward him, but veered, and wrapped around Alira instead. Her eyes glazed, and she collapsed. Inside her mind, she saw it all. The first vow, the first wedding, the first betrayal. Each cycle replayed in fragments, moments lost to time, stitched into her bones. Kale kneeling in ash, cradling her body. A city burning. A queen laughing in grief. She awoke gasping, clinging to Kale's wrist. We've failed this kingdom before, again and again, but now the flame remembers. And so do I. The vision haunted Alira for days. She remembered things too vividly to dismiss, her hands shaking as she tried to write, her voice trembling when she spoke Kale's name. But the worst memory was not death. It was love. Pure, dangerous, defiant love, the kind that defied the gods. She remembered kissing him beneath blood-red skies, promising never to leave. And then she remembered breaking that promise. She found Bastion, her cousin, her oldest ally, in the outer courtyard, inspecting a blade. He was one of the few who knew about the vow, who had seen the nightmares and believed them. If you remember more lives than one, he asked her, then how do you know which one is the real you? She didn't have an answer. All she knew was that each life brought them closer to the truth, and each truth came with a higher price. Meanwhile, Kale confronted his mother. Seraphine waited for him in the ember throne, draped in black, a goblet of wine untouched beside her. What do you remember? She asked coldly. He didn't answer. Instead, he asked, Did you know we had lived before? Her silence was louder than any admission. The vow isn't new, is it? You've seen this happen. Again and again. She stood. And I have stopped it. Again and again. Her voice cracked, not with weakness, but weariness. She confessed then, not to malice, but to fear, that the fire was never meant to be held by mortals, that she had once tried to wield it for love and was burned, that Kale was her second chance, not to fix the world, to fix herself. He left that night without another word, and for the first time in her reign, Seraphine cried. A festival lit the capital that night, the Ember Vigil, a yearly celebration meant to honor the gods of flame. But for Alira and Kale, it felt like mockery. They stood on the royal balcony, watching lanterns float skyward while the people danced below, unaware of the ancient power awakening beneath their feet. Alira turned to Kale. They call this night sacred, but the only sacred thing I've seen here is you. Kyle couldn't speak. Her words burned more than the flame in his chest. In that moment, he wanted nothing more than to kiss her, not because of fate or duty or prophecy, but because she made the fire inside him feel human. But as they leaned in, a scream echoed from the Temple of Embers. The structure had been set ablaze, not by rebels, but by Seraphine's order. She had raised it to erase the past. Inside the flames, a child priestess burned. Alira rushed forward but was held back by Orin. The fire isn't natural, he said. It's calling something. In the chaos, a single ember floated through the air and landed on Alira's shoulder. It didn't burn. It marked. Suddenly her skin erupted with sigils, ancient ones, glowing beneath her flesh. The crowd gasped. People fell to their knees. The flame chooses, an elder whispered. It hasn't chosen a queen in 500 years. And now, it had. But not Seraphine, not Kale, Alira. With the city still trembling from the fire at the temple, Seraphine summoned the council. In a cold chamber of stone and shadow, she addressed the gathered lords and generals. The girl is a threat, she declared. She is not flame-born. She is a false echo. But Bastion rose from the side. If the flame chooses falsely, then why do your ancestors rest in ash? Murmurs rippled. Tension thickened. Seraphine's control cracked. Meanwhile, Elira was taken to the Sanctum of Embers, a hidden vault beneath the palace, built for flame trials. She was to face the trial of heat, 3 challenges to prove her soul's worth. First, the mirror of memory, where she was shown every failure of every life she had ever lived. She faced her own deaths, her betrayals, her regrets, and stood, not without tears, but without shame. Second, the room of flame, where fire itself danced around her, trying to seduce, to terrify, to dominate. But Elira didn't flinch. She listened to it, and it spoke back, soft as breath. You are not the first, but you may be the last. The third trial was silence. A full hour in complete void. No fire, no voice, no Kale, just herself. And in that hour, she began to remember who she was beyond the vow. She emerged from the trial chamber barefoot, bleeding, but alive, and crowned not with gold, but fire. The flame had chosen, and the palace would burn before Seraphine let that truth stand. Tension fractured the capital like cracks in glass. Half the court now whispered Elira's name as a blessing. The other half prepared for war. Kale stood between them, no longer sure where loyalty lay. Seraphine demanded his sword. Elira offered him her hand. And Kale, for the first time in his life, made no vow. I am no one's weapon, he said. Not anymore. The streets filled with masked supporters of the true flame, painting Elira's sigils across walls. Seraphine retaliated with arrests, curfews, executions. Fires blazed through rebel strongholds, but each time they were extinguished, the flame reignited elsewhere. The people had chosen, long before the crown realized it. In the shadows, Orin whispered of Eleron. The flame is waking there, he warned, and it will not wait for a throne to decide what to do. Elira and Kyle met in secret, beneath the temple ruins, where the last sigil had begun to glow. It's happening again, Kale said. The same as before. But this time, Elira smiled. Then let's change the ending, not with blood, with truth. And so they made a plan. One last journey, one last descent into the fire, to confront the past, to break the cycle, and to face the one who still held the staff that burned the world once, the Ember Queen. They descended into Eleron beneath a moonless sky, the entrance newly unearthed behind the ruined altar. The ground pulsed with heat, like a beast breathing deep underground. Elira and Kyle led the way, followed by Bastion, Orin, and 2 of the rebel flame-bearers. The tunnel was carved in obsidian and veins of glowing stone. The deeper they went, the warmer the air became, dry, metallic, tasting of forgotten history. Eleron had not been destroyed. It had been sleeping. Along the tunnel walls, murals depicted the first flame-bearers not as conquerors, but as healers, guardians who preserve balance between the living and the fire. They had names once erased from history, faces that shimmered in shifting torchlight. One mural showed 2 figures holding hands over a burning altar, encircled by sigils identical to those on Elira's shoulders. Her breath caught. She had been here before. The path opened into a vast cavern. Eleron revealed itself slowly. Buildings swallowed in ash, staircases melted into black glass, towers leaning like memories of war. And at the heart of it all, a floating prism of living flame, suspended above a fractured dais, the primordial flame. It pulsed with sentience, a presence that stared back when they looked. Kale stepped forward, and the fire shifted. But before he could speak, Seraphine's voice cut the silence like steel. She stood behind them, wrapped in flame-forged armor, eyes alight with power. The Ember Guard surrounded the group, weapons drawn, magic crackling at their fingertips. Seraphine raised the Ember Staff high, her voice echoing with a spell lost to time. Break the flame! Bind it to my name! The primordial flame shrieked. The cavern trembled. Sigils cracked open on the floor, swallowing light. The flame began to spiral, uncontrollable, drawn toward her voice. Elira reached out to stop her, but it was already too late. Eleron had awakened, and it was angry. The ground split beneath their feet. Kyle and Elira were thrown apart, swallowed into different chambers of the ancient city. Kyle landed hard against molten stone, the air around him vibrating with old pain. He He staggered to his feet in what looked like a sanctuary, circular, domed, its walls etched with a single word: endure. There, visions began. Not ghosts, echoes, his past selves. The boy who burned his first home, the warrior who failed to save Elira, the monster who begged for death. Meanwhile, Elira awoke in a chamber of mirrors, each one showing her a version of herself, one fierce, one broken, one crowned in fire, one consumed by it. They whispered her doubts back to her. You are always the spark that fails. But she didn't look away. She stared until the reflections trembled. I am not what I was, she whispered. And I am not done yet. Above them, Seraphine fused with the flame. The ember staff cracked in her grip, pouring power into her veins. She did not become a queen. She became a conduit. Fire wrapped around her body like a second skin. She floated above the dais, eyes glowing white, voice echoing with layered tones. Not just hers. All of them. Every queen, every bearer, every curse. I am the last flame, she declared, and I will burn this cycle to ash. Kale emerged first, scarred, steady, no longer fighting the fire inside him, but carrying it. He didn't roar. He breathed. Elira followed soon after, eyes alight not with flame, but memory. She remembered the first vow. She remembered the moment it was broken. And now, with all of Eleron listening, she spoke. We are not your heirs. We are your end. Seraphine attacked first, a spear of flame thrust downward, shattering the stone where Elira stood. Kale deflected the next with an outstretched arm, redirecting it into a swirling ring that circled the room. The battle wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. For every blow they struck, a memory echoed. For every spell they cast, a lifetime returned. The fire reacted to their grief, their rage, their refusal. Elira and Kale fought not as two bodies, but as one rhythm. Their marks glowed in sync, pulses of red and gold echoing with their breath. Elira called the flame not to attack, but to listen. It wrapped around her blade like silk. She's not the flame, Elira said. She's what corrupted it. Seraphine laughed, but her voice cracked. For the first time she looked afraid. As Kyle clashed with her again, something inside him shifted. He didn't strike to kill. He struck to reach. You gave me your fire to save yourself, he said, but I won't carry your fear anymore. With one final push, he drove his palm into her chest. Not violently, but gently. The ember staff shattered between them, and the flame poured out. Seraphine screamed, not in pain, but release. The fire left her body like breath finally exhaled. Her armor cracked. Her crown fell. And then, silence. She collapsed in Kyle's arms, small again, human again. I wanted to protect you, she whispered. I just forgot how. Then her body faded into ash, not consumed, but returned. The primordial flame hovered above them, smaller now, pulsing slowly. For the first time in centuries, it was calm. They stood in the ruins of the sanctuary, surrounded by heat and silence. Kyle turned to Elira, hands trembling. It's done, he whispered. But Elira shook her head. Not yet. She walked to the floating crystal of flame, the last ember of Eleron's soul, and held out her hand. It drifted toward her, testing her. It did not burn. It bowed. Kale joined her, and together they placed their hands around the flame. A new vow formed, not one of sacrifice, not of silence, one of choice. I vow not to bind you, Kale said, but to walk beside you. I vow not to burn alone, Elira answered, but to burn with you. I vow not to rewrite history, they spoke in unison, but to make it ours. The flame responded, not with fire, but warmth. A gentle light spread across the ruined city, filling every crack, every wound. Towers reformed. Statues mended. Glyphs glowed once more. Eleron was not reborn in destruction, but in remembrance. Above ground, the sky turned golden. Lanterns rose from the streets in celebration, though no one knew why. A shift had happened. Somewhere deep in the bones of the earth, something had changed. Weeks passed. The kingdom stood still, awaiting news of its queen and prince. Then, one morning, a ripple of flame passed through the capital, not burning, not scalding, but awakening. Flowers bloomed in ash. Birds returned to silent woods. In the old courtyard, a tree cracked through stone, reaching for the sky. Elira now walked the restored halls of Eleron, writing everything she remembered. Every life, every vow, every time they failed. She wrote to remember, but also to teach. Kale trained young fire-bearers in the northern chamber, teaching them how to hold magic without fear. No crowns, no thrones, just purpose. Bastion helped build new sanctuaries where magic and knowledge would be passed forward. Orin vanished into the wind, saying only, "The flame still has secrets to share." Seraphine's ashes were scattered in the garden she once burned, and from them roses bloomed, red as blood, soft as forgiveness. And far beyond the mountains, in a land where the wind never ceased, a forgotten forest whispered a name no one had spoken in centuries. In the roots of a dead tree, a hand emerged, clutching a shard of the broken ember staff. The ember pulsed once, then again. The flame remembered. Not all fire destroys. Some fire clears the way for something new. Elira and Kyle stood on a cliff overlooking the reborn capital. Their hands were entwined, not by prophecy, but by choice. Below them, life moved, not perfectly, but peacefully. The past had not vanished, but it no longer ruled them. They had broken the vow, but from its ashes, they had made another, one not bound by fate, but freedom. The flame inside them pulsed once more, not to warn, but to remind. Their story was only the beginning.